What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. With a few days of playtime on the new patch, I wanted to offer some thoughts on where I think the game's going and the good direction Blizzard's taking with balance so far with Overwatch 2. Starting off with the This is Sparta kick, Zenyatta is now a warrior monk, 225 HP total, and boots that are made for walking. Zen's melee now does a base of 45 damage, which I believe with a Discord orb should take it up to 56. Briggs Bash does 50 now. That's the DPS Overwatch 2 version. So Zen certainly hasn't been skipping leg day. 2 points I want to make. One, on the balance of it. The short answer to that is it's good. Strong hero. You want to make a character better in Overwatch, just give it more stats and a new ability. I'll talk more details on the interconnectivity of the rest of the game and all that, but the first thing I want to point out is how cool this is to see the Overwatch 2 design in motion. Let's think back to Overwatch 1 for a moment. In 2017, Blizzard had a very similar problem with a character like Zenyatta. Then, very similar to now, mobile characters were so oppressive we were in a meta called dive. The perspective of the support players back then was that they were the ones getting targeted and it was hard to fight back. In the Overwatch 1's design, because everything was intended to be unique and they didn't want to have any heroes have overlap of just about any kind with another, rather than giving a weak hero a new ability, they instead more so biased towards creating a new hero with a new playstyle that could do new things. This, of course, gifted us the character Brigitte, who was designed to not be able to die to Tracer in the first Inception. I emphasize this because some commenters in my big review video of Overwatch 2 pointed out that the idea of heroes not being unique in Overwatch 2, well, doesn't that sound lame? Doesn't it sound boring? Wow, they'll all just be the same? You're saying this like is a good thing, Frito. Yes, it is a good thing. Because although concepts like double shield or goats were unique, they were very unhealthy to play against. Whereas, in the reality we live in now with Overwatch 2, a character like Zen is under some problems in the metagame. They kind of just let him play a bit like Brig, right? He's a little bit more tanky now and can kick you away. Well, in Overwatch 2, Brigitte is a more robust version of that, but doesn't have poke. All in all, a lot of the support characters now have knockback abilities. Lucio, Brig, and Zen have their own way to push a diver away. But the truth is, at least for me, none of them feel like I'm playing the same thing. Just because they all have a similar tool to interact with the game, it doesn't mean their hero or personality or gameplay style is in any way similar. That's one way that I think I like the way they've dealt with a pretty glaring issue with the game. Now I think it's safe to say Zenyatta is a good character at the worst, and possibly like the best character in the game. I'm not entirely sure how I feel. I think this discussion about supports has been really murky for me. While immediately, it was very obvious to me that the support gameplay in Overwatch 2 would be very different to what players were used to at like an average level of play from Overwatch 1, safe behind 2 tanks. But once you like curve or the duelist style playmaking approach that sports have to have, the truth is they have insane impact and carry potential. So much so that I think the support players in the Overwatch League's opening week were the by far standout players among all of them. So there's a chance that Zen being buffed to this degree will make him a big pick rate hero at the higher tiers of play. But I think for just about everybody else, the average player, Zen feels pretty fair. Like he's still easy to hit, but now let's say he has more of a appropriate level of difficulty when it comes to targeting him. For me, the health buff is bigger than the kick because the kick, boop, and damage doesn't come into play very often. Like if something is in kick range, it's probably gone pretty wrong. Or of course, I've seen a lot of gameplay where the Zenyatta kick is just like almost primal raging something into a corner because there is no cooldown on the ability, so you can just keep kicking a tank into a corner repeatedly. All right, so maybe that is just like obnoxious and maybe there should be a delay with the power kick, like a bit of a cooldown, just so it can't be spammed so easily because it's kind of obnoxious. But for the most part, I don't think it is a bigger contributor to Zen's playability than just having 25 extra health. That is so big. I'll also note, other nerfs in the patch. For example, Soldier doing less damage at range. We'll get to other patch notes as well, but one that I think matters a lot is a character like Soldier who does less damage at range. Just in general, the breakpoints of the game feel to be a bit more in Zen's favor. Whereas prior to health buff, a character like Lucio probably can just crawl all over him. That little bit of extra health might mean he has a good chance of fighting back, not to mention kick back. But I do think now that Zen's a bit more robust, you naturally should see a very swarmy, flank-heavy playstyle drop a bit in value, because if you're not afraid of your Zen dying for free to mobility, well, he gets set up and things that aggress onto you get discorded and bursted down, which is very different to what would happen if Zen was weak, where he would easily get targeted, fall, and then the mobility characters would keep swarming around and never really get punished, right? Getting breakpoints to punish mobility aggression, which in Overwatch 1 you would just do with a stun, right? You would just stun lock it and it couldn't move. So being mobile was not really worth anything. But Overwatch 2, you're gonna need to do that with your own aggression. And what can tend to happen is a mobile team typically kind of has to go aggressive to do as much damage as a more poke Zen-oriented team. So as long as you outplay that first dive, a thing like Discord late into an engagement with Zen out in the distance, if he didn't fall early in the fight, he'll be a massive difference maker to snowball the rest of the fight. Right now, we would say that Ana's utility has the biggest impact from the support position, but if Zen doesn't fall, Discord will definitely be it, in my opinion. Keep in mind as well, a lot of characters that you feel were really strong from the beta, if Zen's kept alive, all of a sudden look a lot weaker with Discord Orb on top of them. The tank characters especially. I'm looking at you, Orisa. But even Doomfist, very similar to like Wrecking Ball in Overwatch 1, you might think dive tanks would be Zen's biggest weakness, but the truth is Doomfist in Overwatch 2 feels a lot to me like Wrecking Ball did in Overwatch 1, where if you can't kill the Zen, well, you're going to get discorded and you don't have a shield. So all this extra life and blocking that you can do as either of those characters, it doesn't do as much when you simply can get discorded and focused down, falling in places where you normally would feel like you could survive. So Zen really does have the potential to slow the game down a lot and punish movement quite a bit, and I don't think we're in that place yet, but the further they push that way, the more we would be in a sniper meta. That's probably what's coming next if they continue down this road. Other support changes were to Ana, Bap, and Brig. They were mostly quality of life for me, so I won't go into depth here. Support feels a lot better to play since you know Zen is a viable option on the roster. The hero select screen looks really unimpressive from the support position because they didn't get any new characters and not any major reworks, but now that Zen is a serious threat, he can counteract a lot of the things in the game that you may have been struggling to deal with otherwise prior to this point. Now let's talk about the damage changes. Sombra moves slower while in stealth to compensate for the roll passive, largely unaffected, especially since she uses stealth out of combat, where speed isn't as crucial. The Soldier and Sojourn changes were really interesting though. Soldier was at the top of the S tier characters, and this patch note reads like Soldier falling out of the nerf tree, hitting every branch on the way down. On paper, it might look like he would be gutted. Like, what could he meaningfully fight after these nerfs? Damage going down to 18, which will require you a few more bullets to kill, and move speed now compensating for the roll passive. Sprint only will give him 40%. Tac Visor will have damage fall off at range, so it won't be as effective at super long range, which seems fair considering it aims for you. But at more reasonable ranges where you can see your target, you will be able to do double damage with your shots if you can hit criticals while aiming with Tac Visor, but otherwise it will aim for you. These are all pretty good changes, I'd say. To put Soldier in the place I'd like to see him, which is good on his best maps, but not overpowering the game, I think that's where they've arrived to, because when I play Soldier on his best defensive holding map from the history of Overwatch, Gibraltar, you can sit on the high ground, look down on enemies approaching, and despite the damage nerf, hit helixes and headshots to do your job really well. But I think on other maps, where you're either going to fight the other two major styles, either flanker characters that want to get in close on you, or sniper characters that can one-shot kill you at range, that's where the damage nerf really starts to matter. As in either of those matchups, needing more bullets to kill means they will just kill you every time almost, if you don't aim really well. So as you go up the skill tiers, I'd say, I'm starting to feel like Soldier begins to fall off in the matchups you would assume he should lose. making him more of a reliable map-specific pick. Still really good considering how easy he is to play, but not overpowering the game, I don't think. More complicated now is Sojourn. They would really like a character like Sojourn to be good. She's the design of the game, the front of all the marketing. Sojourn, they reduced the cooldown of her power slide, which was a great change in my opinion, because it's kind of difficult to use actually, at least to do much with it. And they doubled the size of her railgun hitbox. In theory, that could have made her widely overpowered. And maybe this even was what it was at in the alpha when everyone thought she was overpowered. I'm wondering if like everyone's just better at playing around her or what exactly it is, but I'm still thoroughly unimpressed with Sojourn's playstyle. The reason is because if we gave a template for why Soldier is really good in Overwatch 2, Sojourn's like the opposite. Whereas Soldier gets more effectiveness from holding a high ground positioning and playing off in his zone and running away, Sojourn's almost built to run into the fight. And think about hit scans in the past. How do they work? They either like pressure or snipe. Soldier does that more a bit in an off-angle approach. Ashe is really good at defending a position, typically a main angle bombardment of damage, then coaching away defensively to create distance. The thing is, Sojourn's movement, while you can use it to escape, and I'll admit, Sojourn's pretty hard to track down with a lot of characters. She's got a tiny hitbox, moves really quick, and it's tough to hit her as she's sliding and jumping. Her problem is, if you're sliding and jumping away, well, you're losing the railgun charge that you need to be in the fight to generate. So it's almost like you need to shoot at the tank or a shield to work up to the railgun first, then dive in aggressively before it goes away to almost surprise them with a sniper shot. But it seems like going for that exact play is just like a more expensive skill and putting your body at risk option than just playing Widowmaker or just Soldier who can heal himself. Like there isn't really any special need to use the power slide. Soldier's doing just fine. Like there's only one tank on the field, so jumping over a shield isn't all that useful because there often isn't one anyway. So you can just stay on the ground and play the high ground position and get all the sightlines you need. The ways I've seen Sojourn pop off the most is in the mix of the mobility combat where maybe a Tracer or Genji struggle to track her down, she dashes away, gets the railgun, bursts them in the head, and it looks impressive when you see it in a highlight reel, but it just feels like such a low percentage play to make that if you wanted to have that playstyle, is there just better heroes to do that? Or if you want to go in aggressive, I almost just feel I'd be better off playing Tracer. I don't get what her point is. To be fair, when Ashe was introduced to the game, very similar growing pains happened where the concept of what her best maps and team comps and matchups would be weren't really set in stone yet. So maybe we'll get that with Sojourn over time and with more balance tweaks. In the alpha, she felt like if Widowmaker could snipe from the hip, but now she plays a bit more like Widowmaker with extra steps. I would say if we continue to see Soldier get nerfed and Sojourn get buffed, that might create a lane for her to be good. But also as well, I think a key hero matchup that you will definitely appreciate Sojourn's kit for is up against flying characters like Echo and Pharah. Average players hate playing them, especially over time as hit scan range got nerfed. Those heroes flying out in the distance can be really oppressive. They're not seeing so much playtime in Overwatch 2 for a whole host of reasons, but if we ever see a meta where they start to get stronger, that's where I think Sojourn, with her ability to jump super high in the air and have a railgun, like that's gonna catch out Echo and Pharah a lot, I feel. It's just you don't need that job fulfilled at the moment. Last section, we'll talk about the tanks that got changed. Winston got buffed, which may have us scratching our heads because on this channel, we've been talking about how good Winston is since the first video on Overwatch 2 I made. Looks like I wasn't high enough on Winston. If you watched the Overwatch League this past week, he very clearly is the best team-oriented tank, which I've been saying all along, haven't I? Mainly because Winston in his current form has the most resiliency to most things. Remember, this is a pretty easy way to figure out what's going to be meta in Overwatch. It isn't what can be the strongest, it's what heroes have the least weaknesses. Because you don't really want to ever have to swap your strategy or comp because it just wastes time and ult resources, ideally you want to pick characters that you know the enemy can't counter too easily. Although some characters are pretty strong against Winston right now. Reaper, for example, is quite the tank buster yet again and can really hold his ground up against a lot of tanks, while there's a lot of DPS that can't. Against some of the best things in the game, Winston's the most reliable. 800 shield on his bubble is the most amount of tanking you can kind of get, at least for the flanky style engagements that happen in Overwatch 2. Rein's shield has 1200, but it's also easier to navigate and kind of requires you to rush in. Whereas Winston has more of a spider monkey playstyle now, where inside his bubble, he can just sit and poke from super long range. And if you've learned anything from Overwatch 1, having a tank that has ranged poke is always a big boost. So this should come at no surprise if you've watched all the other videos we've made, especially the how to counter Orisa video, where Orisa looks pathetically weak up against a Winston dive. Not to target her, of course, but to target her team while she can do nothing about it. Winston has the most flexibility of any tank. So all that's to say that his ult fire did not need to be buffed. Aaron on the Overwatch League pre-show seemed a little bit annoyed that he had received so much feedback from the pros that Winston was an incredibly weak character, almost like, hey, why did you beg us to buff him if you're all gonna play him at such a high pick rate? Well, it turns out Overwatch is a tough game to guess how it's gonna pan out. The truth is, off tanks were clearly too strong in the alpha, but in the alpha, they buffed the Winston bubble. And that's when I was like, yeah, this is legit. So I don't know about you guys, but at least in my beta games, Winston's getting played all the time. Although I don't know if Primal Rage is as impactful as it used to be. Having a railgun to soften up targets before you dive, and frankly, just to have something to do while you're holding position on a corner or inside your bubble, it's very, 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 very good. Other tanks require you to go aggressive to get value, whereas Winston is like the most traditional main tank style in that he sets the engagement and kind of holds his position. Even Rein doesn't really do that anymore. He needs to just run in because he doesn't have poke. All right, let's get to the other tanks though. Zarya's Grav got nerfed. I'm slightly worried about this character and frankly, the entire tank hierarchy as we know it, because the more the entire player base realizes how good Winston is, finally, a lot of the assumptions on how strong the other tanks are, I think might go to the wayside. So I don't want to get too much in depth with it because I wonder if there's a counteracting patch this week, Thursday, to tune things yet again. For the new play data, now that the players got buffed with understanding the game a bit better. Grav change though, kind of irrelevant. Wrecking Ball had his knockback reverted, which playing him these past few days, I was shocked at how far people go. Oh my God, Overwatch 1 was a wacky game. All right, so the knockback from Ball is really, really, really strong, but that's his best play. So to make Wrecking Ball work in Overwatch 2, you absolutely must displace targets into a spot where you can have your team focus them down. I still think that's a bit gimmicky because the more mobility they have, the less likely they'll even get hit by such a knockback, but also maybe they just run away after you knock them anyway. And then once that happens, Wrecking Ball's got the pile driver and his cannons, but neither of which seem as impactful as a lot of the other offensive tools that the other tanks have. Winston can snipe now, and Doom's still got combos. Maybe Wrecking Ball, just like Doom, has to apply a bit of a concussion effect that slows you down after you got hit with pile driver, because that's actually surprisingly important to Doom's playstyle, and is what makes a lot of the projectile dive characters like Genji, for example, so good diving in with him, is the things he hits get set up for follow-up, whereas hitting a target mid-air in a pile driver isn't as easy or reliable. Wrecking Ball, I think, is on a pathway to be somewhat playable, but I think it's got to be on like a map with very favorable geometry, and that's just going to be the story of Wrecking Ball moving forward, since we have like an upgraded version of him in the roster. Last up, let's talk about Roadhog, who got his whole hog buff. Now, because it's a transforming ability, any stun or sleep or disable that hits him, he still retains it. Like after the stun, he'll still have the whole hog weapon ready to fire. And he can use hook and breather without canceling the ability. I feel all these buffs are like necessary to help Hog get out of the gutter. It all looks kind of overpowered on paper, but the truth is Hog is one of the easiest characters to interact with in Overwatch 2. I am starting to like him more now though, mainly because players are playing Winston. And while Hog had a bad matchup against Orisa 2.0, who out-tanked him and just stunned him out of breather, if your team is playing defensive and needs to catch a dive, Hog is a pretty good option yet again, and it's going to hold up against these Winston comps in a way that Orisa doesn't, mostly because Hog has more close range damage. And while Orisa is good against Doom as well, I don't know, I think Hog might be even better. The more I think about it and the more I think players learn how overrated Orisa is, the more I'm leaning towards rating Hog above her, because although Orisa can brawl on the objective better than Hog because he gets shut down by so many abilities, if you're having a defensive playstyle and say you want to keep your Zen alive, as things come get him, well, Hog can stop divers from killing his team more because the threat of his damage and hook are so instant. Whereas I think you have to be more skilled to get the same kills on the divers coming in on your team. And certainly I think Hog's just got more of a damage threat to burst down Winston than Orisa can. I wouldn't say I want Orisa buffed though, as the playstyle she does have is definitely annoying when you don't counter it. And I'm not sure how much I want Roadhog buffed either. Realistically, I think most of the time you're going to feel most comfortable playing Winston. All right, guys, well, that's a patch review for you, done and dusted. Excited to keep talking about the game. I like the direction they're going. We really need to get a ranked mode, though. I have no idea when to expect one, to be honest, but I think that's when a lot of us more try-hardy gamers are going to really invest into Overwatch 2, because at the moment, it still seems like there's so much in flux and not a whole lot to play for, so while you can be that guy playing Winston each and every game because he's the strongest tank, there's players out here just trying to learn Doomfist for the first time. So maybe the community's not ready for a ranked mode yet. We'll see though. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this brand new patch. Hit subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when our new videos go live. Clicking that bell will send you notifications directly to your cell phone. It's like I'm sliding into your DMs. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.